Well, it's that time again. The Stanley Cup Playoffs are beginning tonight, and we've got to do a prediction video. Why not make a video where you anger pretty much every fan base and get roasted senseless when you're wrong and never get given credit when you're right? Now, as a Sharks fan, I'm obviously not going to see any playoff action for probably a good half decade, unless May 8th goes a little bit differently. So while I'm doing this video, I'm going to rank the series from each conference in terms of the most fun to watch and try to remain as unbiased as possible. And again, this is all just to piss a lot of people off and argue with you guys in the comment section. Let's get into it. All right, so I just joined the NHL.com's overall bracket one. I didn't do one for my community this year, honestly, just because I didn't have a lot of time this past weekend. That's on me. I apologize. But let's start in the Western Conference. And some interesting things here. The fact that Seattle has made the playoffs. I was super right last year in the fact that I thought that they would be awful, as an expansion team should be. However, I was completely wrong that they would be able to use Martin Jones and come back into the get into the playoffs. That being said, they're going up against the Stanley Cup champions. So, again, I'm ranking these series in terms of ones that I think are the most interesting, from worst to most interesting. And Colorado-Seattle is probably the least interesting. Now, Colorado doesn't have Gabriel Landeskog, so their depth is going to be tested. This isn't the same powerhouse that won the Cup last year, but they still have Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, who is coming back from injury, and Rantanen, so it really doesn't matter. On the other side, the Kraken have done a fantastic job by making the playoffs. With the roster that they have no true superstar, a lot of guys that are just probably second, third liners on most other contending teams, but you have to give them credit. Absolutely incredible run, and if they go with Martin Jones in net, maybe you get Stanley Cup final Martin Jones, or you get the one that would just get absolutely blasted by Vegas. So, in terms of this series, I think it is the least exciting. I think that it would have been far more exciting had Seattle ended up with Vegas, just because that would have been two teams that weren't in the league 6 years ago. But nonetheless, we're going to go with Colorado, and we're going to go in 5 games. I think that Seattle gets one at home, but I'm going to say Colorado in 5 games. All right, on to my third most exciting Western Conference series, and that's going to be Vegas and Winnipeg. The allure of Vegas has definitely worn off. They are no longer the can't do anything wrong franchise since they came into the league and went to the Stanley Cup. They have made a lot of questionable moves, trying to get the shiniest toy every single year, and it has caught up to them. And in net, they are rocking a tandem of Laurent Brossoit and the corpse of Jonathan Quick. It appears Laurent Brossoit is going to go in game number 1, and I've been to Vegas twice now. I'm a Sharks fan. I can't stand the Golden Knights team, but good luck to any team trying to win in that barn, because the first 5-minute intro that they put on, I now understand why Martin Jones would give up a goal in the first 5 minutes of every single game played there. Vegas at home is just an absolute animal. However, on the other side, I low-key think that this is the last kick at the can for Winnipeg with the current core that they've got, and they have probably a top 4, maybe 5 goaltender in the league in Connor Hellebuck. They definitely have the advantage in net. You've got Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, as well as a Norris caliber season from Josh Morrissey. This one is awfully tough when you think about it. I think that Vegas is the better team, and I think a lot of people are going to take Vegas. But I don't think you should count out Winnipeg, because when you look at the roster as a whole, it's a very gritty roster. This one's awfully tough, just because of the goaltender situation, but because Vegas has home ice advantage, I'm going to go with Vegas. I'm going to say in 7 games. I think this one goes the full 7. I wouldn't be stunned at all if Winnipeg actually won this series. All right, number 2 in terms of most interesting series in the Western Conference is going to be Edmonton and LA for me. I'll be totally wide open here. I think that this is Edmonton's year. I think that when you look at what McDavid is doing, he is in his prime, era adjusted. We are seeing Wayne Gretzky. For anyone that was born after 1990, this is Wayne Gretzky stuff that he is doing. He is far and away better than every single other player that is on the ice, and it's absolutely wild. When you think back to last year when these two teams played, it did go 7. However, there's no reason that it should have gone 7 if it weren't for Mike Smith legitimately throwing games. Connor McDavid had to drag Edmonton past LA, and LA is much better this year. I think that defensively, LA is a far superior team. But again, when it comes to goaltender, the gap is no longer this massive one because Mike Smith is no longer on Edmonton. Jack Campbell was a tire fire, but Stuart Skinner appears to be good enough. And that is all the Oilers need, is just good enough. They'll need him to steal one game in the series, but the firepower for Edmonton is unbelievable. Now, the one factor that I think could play heavily and is going to weigh heavily no matter what series Edmonton plays in is that their power play numbers are all world. If you look at McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, all of their points, they acquired so many on the power play. And as we know, in the playoffs, it is much harder to score. If their power play does not click at like a 25% rate, LA's got a shot here. And when you look at LA, they have probably one of the best defensive tandems at center in Kopitar and Danault. We saw what Danault did with Montreal, where he essentially wiped out top lines, which was crazy. He does not get enough love in the sport for what he does defensively. However, I still don't think that LA can keep up. Their goaltending situation, again, doesn't give them enough of an advantage over Edmonton, and I'm going to say Edmonton wins this one, and I think it's in 5 games. I honestly think that this Edmonton Oilers team is just humming. We are seeing the best player of our generation at the peak, and let's not pretend that he is, he disappears in the playoffs. He had the most points in the postseason last year, and he only made it to the 3rd round. Unbelievable. I think Edmonton moves on. And then in terms of the most insane, fun, interesting series, I think if you took the two teams outside of their respective fan bases, neither one would be among the most interesting to watch. But Dallas, Minnesota, the reason why this series is, in my opinion, again, as a person who does not have a dog in this fight, is the most interesting is A, they are the closest in terms of who is going to win this series, and B, both of them are going to be real heavy. This reminds me a little bit of the early 2000s Dallas-Edmonton series, where very low scoring, absolutely kicked the shit out of each other, and I think it's just going to be really fun to watch and surprise a lot of people in terms of just like fun hockey to watch in the playoffs. This is going to be, in my opinion, the most quote-unquote playoff hockey that we're going to see of any playoff matchups in the first round. Now, when it comes to who is going to win this series, I really wrote off Minnesota because of that $14 million in dead cap. The fact that they have been so good with their cap situation is incredible. They deserve full marks because the Parise and Suter contracts, $14 million against the dead cap means that they just don't have, that's essentially 2 second or even a first line player that they just don't have because of the cap. Boldy has been incredible. I think where it's going to, the big advantage here is Dallas having Ottinger. I think that Ottinger proved to himself, or proved to everyone last year in the playoffs that he just looked absolutely nuts. They've got a 100-point scorer in Jason Robertson to go up against Kaprizov, but I think that either one of these teams that makes it to the next round is going to be injured. So with that being said, man, Winnipeg is a lot like the Leafs in the fact that they can't get out of the first round. I really think Dallas is going to win from like a, on paper standpoint. Oh, but you know what? The state of hockey, it's your time. They're going to shock everyone, make it to the second round. This is going 7. Minnesota in 7. All right, so that is the Western Conference first round. On to the East. Now, I did say I don't have a dog in this fight, but I did love the Toronto Maple Leafs before I became old enough and really started to understand hockey and became a Sharks fan when I was 13 years old. And my old man is a diehard Leafs fan. He has been his whole life. And I really want to see Toronto win a cup so that my dad sees one in his lifetime. Well, he was 7 the last time they won a cup. So I do sort of have a dog in this fight in the sense that I would love to see Toronto win. I know everyone in the comments, memes aside. Also, I mentioned this in a prior video. If you guys are going to game number 1, let me know. I'm going to game number 1 with my dad. I'll be there at the party in Maple Leaf Square, and then we're going into game number 1. I could not be more thrilled. The last time I was at a Maple Leafs playoff game, 2013, game 6, before the game 7 collapse, and it was one of the most insane hockey memories I have. Say what you will about the corporate nonsense at the Leafs games in the regular season is a whole different animal in the playoffs. All right, so again, we'll rank in terms of least interesting to most interesting. I think number 4 in terms of most interesting teams is going to be Carolina and New York. I got to go to Carolina this year for the Stadium Series, got to go see a game at PNC. Love the fan base. Totally underrated. It was Cam Ward's retirement night. Loved it. And I'm a big fan of the Islanders, and I think UBS Arena is the best one in the NHL. Love their fan base as well, but I just think that from an outside perspective, if you aren't an Islander fan or a Carolina Hurricane fan, you're probably not super up on this. I think the other thing that really makes this kind of less interesting is that Carolina is not operating at full strength. They don't have Svechnikov. Pacioretty would have been huge, and I think that would really make them a powerhouse team. We'll see what Barzal does against the Islanders, but the Islanders didn't, get in on their own. They needed a lot of help from teams just around them performing poorly. So, which is why I'm kind of down on the series. I think Carolina wins this series. Sorokin is one of the best goaltenders on the planet, and they play a really, playoff-style hockey in that sense, but Carolina, I think their talent, even without Svechnikov, wins out there. I'm going to say Carolina in 6 games. Next up, number 3 among most interesting series to watch in the Eastern Conference, Boston and Florida. Now, obviously, Boston with the greatest regular season in the history of the NHL, which is just unbelievable when you consider that a lot of people had them picked in like the wild card, and Bergeron comes back, sure, but he's old. Krejci comes back, hasn't been in the league in 2 years, and this is why hockey requires chemistry, maybe more than any other sport, because they just gelled and ripped off one of the best seasons ever. The other thing about the Bruins in the playoffs is that if you're not a Bruins fan, it is super frustrating to know that no matter what, you go into a playoff game against Boston down 1-0 because Pasternak, Bergeron, or Marchand is going to score at least 1 goal in a playoff game no matter what. They are one of the most consistent playoff teams in that aspect. And then Florida, obviously just getting in. They honestly got bailed out by Pittsburgh blowing a game to Chicago, which is just incredible when you think about it. This is pretty easy. I think that Boston is going to win this series. However, Florida did take 2 games against Boston, but I think that Alex Lyon had an incredible run, really got them there. I do think Florida takes a game or 2 off of Boston. I'm going to say Boston in 6 games, but it's never going to feel close. Like maybe Boston wins the first 2, Florida wins 1, it goes 3-1, then 3-2, and then Boston wins in game 6. I could totally see this being a sweep as well, but also remember, there's only been 2 teams in the last 24 years that have won the President's Trophy and then won a cup. Hockey requires a lot of luck in the playoffs, and we'll see if Boston has it. Number 2, in terms of the most interesting series to watch, New Jersey and the New York Rangers. And this is going to be a fantastic playoff matchup. First of all, we get a rivalry from just, the Rangers and New Jersey Devils. The New Jersey Devils look like they are going to run the Eastern Conference for 5 years. This team was incredible this year, and they didn't even have Nemec or Luke Hughes in the lineup. I know Luke Hughes started at the very last game of the season, or second last game, but they don't even have 2 of the best defensive prospects in the league, and they're going to get them on entry-level deals probably next year. This team is set up to be a juggernaut for 5 to 10 years, and, Jack Hughes is the real deal. On the other side, the New York Rangers, I think they surprised a lot of people outside of New York Rangers fans, because I apologize if you are a Ranger fan and you don't want to hear this. You are the most obnoxious fan base on social media, more than Toronto, more than Montreal. You guys are just crazy. That being said, I think they overachieved last year a little bit. I think Shesterkin dragged them through to the conference, almost to the cup. But what he did last year was unbelievable. I think Shesterkin is still the best goaltender in the NHL. However, I think that their rebuild, or whatever you want to call it, their prospects that they got during that rebuild year, Lafreniere and Kakko, and Kakko Capo, just aren't amazing. And if they were, the Rangers would be far better. Like, they would be among one of the best, if not the best team in the Eastern Conference this year. They get Kane, they get Tarasenko. We'll see if they can keep up with New Jersey's speed, because New Jersey's going to be very fast. However, when it comes down to it, New Jersey, a lot of young players, also Vitek Vanacek in net, and they're going up against the Rangers, who just went to the conference final, and they have the best goaltender in the world. I'm going to go with the New York Rangers. I think that's going to go 7, but I think it's going to be the New York Rangers moving on. And then the number 1 in terms of most exciting series to watch. Now, again, I try to be unbiased here. Obviously, I'm on the Leafs bandwagon this year and last year, and really all years the Sharks haven't made the playoffs. However, the world stops when Toronto plays in a playoff game. And every year, they blow it in the first round. Everyone on social media gets to roast them senseless, and Leafs fans, they get to cry. Last year, Tampa did not beat Toronto, they survived Toronto. And I think the big issue that we keep seeing with the Leafs is that they get to the elimination games, and then they look down the bench for someone to step up when it matters most, and they do not have anyone that has done that yet. However, this year, the regular season for the Leafs, there was very little buzz. Matthews had a down year from his standards. Marner was still incredible, but it just, other than the point streak at home, you really didn't hear a lot about them. They went and made some great playoff moves, getting McCabe and Ryan O'Reilly. Goaltending is going to be a huge issue. Samsonov was great, but he also got chased out of Washington by Alex Ovechkin for having one of the biggest gaffes by a goaltender in the playoffs in history, other than maybe Mike Smith. Tampa's hurt. Tampa is tired. 3 cup runs in essentially a year and a half, 2 years, because the first year they won was the COVID year, and then they won 2 cups in 8 months. That's just so much hockey. They come in a lot different in terms of like being able to just go skill for skill end to end. They play a lot more rough, and I think some of the moves that Toronto made helped out in that aspect. This has to be Toronto's year to move on, because if it is not, the odds, guys, of a team getting knocked out in the first round of the playoffs 6 or 7 years in a row is like 1 in 750,000. It has to be. And I think it happens in 6 games. I pray for Leafs fans, because not only whether you want to like the Leafs fan base or not, it is better for hockey as a whole to grow the game and get more eyes on it if the Toronto Maple Leafs are further in the playoffs. If they get knocked out in the first round again, it is not what's best for business. I would love to see Toronto go up and face the Boston Bruins in the second round, because then again, we have the most insane series ever. Boston, like I said, I think wins in 6, Carolina in 6, and then New York in, I do think that goes 7. All right, so now on to the semifinals. We're going to have Colorado and Minnesota. These two teams, like, just in the playoffs, Colorado has an issue with Minnesota. I think this is the same kind of thing, though. I think Colorado would beat Minnesota just because pedigree, been there. I think Minnesota is probably a couple years away just because of that cap issue. We're going to go Colorado. I'll try and fly through these guys. Edmonton versus Vegas. I think this is Edmonton's year to get through this. I think that's, again, I think Edmonton will handle it. On the other side, Toronto and Boston. This is what I mean by the world needs Toronto out of the first round. Could you imagine Toronto finally gets out of the second round, and then the reward is just to meet the team that crushes them more than any other team in the playoffs, in the Boston Bruins, after the most historic season ever. And I'm going to say Toronto moves on. Toronto moves on. I'm just kidding. Boston. It's Boston. But I think, I think Toronto pushes them further than people think they would go. Carolina and the New York Rangers. This is tough for me because the Svechnikov thing really is just in the back of my mind. Carolina is such a good team that does not get talked about enough, but losing like your second best or maybe even best player is just tough. And I think if there was a time for the Rangers to do a run again, I'm going to say Shesterkin wins out and they move on to the conference finals. On the West, Edmonton and Colorado, a rematch. This time, I don't think Nathan McKinnon and the boys can keep up with Edmonton. I think Edmonton moves on to the Cup final. Going up against Boston and the New York Rangers, this is pretty chalk. I'm going to say the Boston Bruins move on. However, your Cup champion is not the Boston Bruins. It is the Edmonton Oilers. Connor McDavid cements himself as one of the best of all time. Not that he isn't already. Wins his cup, and the Edmonton Oilers are your Stanley Cup champions in 2023. Let me know what you think and your predictions in the comments down below, guys. This is all just for fun. I apologize if anyone's fan base is upset with my words and, my takes on things. Again, this is going to be a great playoff to watch. Super excited, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.